Welcome, Norma.
I'm actually going to go down here. Can everybody see me? Yes. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I just want to say echo what Hector said earlier. You know, you all are a group of committed folk to be here on a Saturday morning and commit to all day of figuring out what you can do to fight back. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. And this piece, Miguel went over the agenda. This next piece is going to feel like a little bit of a long piece, but it's really important because we're going to kind of take it back to basics of community organizing. How many of you have, are a community organizer or have organized before, whether with your union or, et cetera, right? So we're going to take it back old school to the importance of relationship building, to the importance of one-on-one, to the importance of building that human connection with our friends, our neighbors, people that share our values, and figuring out how this group of close to 500 people invest in engaging other folks so we can mobilize 5,000 people to the congressman's office, to the county board of supervisor, to state capitol, to wherever we have to go, all right? So this piece of our day is really going to be about the fundamentals of community organizing, right? How many of you are on Facebook and on Twitter and all that stuff? And it's good, and we have to use these new tools. But at the end of the day, if we're going to be we the people, then the we is about me getting to know Jessica, understand what her story is, understand what she cares about, understand what she's passionate about, and understand how she wants to take action, right? So we're going to take it a little bit old school and think about what we can do in our everyday lives to organize and to continue to build people power. So we're going to do that here. You're going to actually practice some stuff that I'm going to talk about and try to model during lunch, and then later on in the afternoon we're going to get to like the nuts and bolts of all these issues, all these fights that Hector spoke about. What are we doing to protect our LGBT community? What are we doing around our immigrant rights work? Because all of us, I think that's the beauty of ACLU, is we're a civil rights, civil liberties organization. We fight for everyone's rights, right?
Right.
Everyone's rights. And so the beauty of this organization is that, we're intersectionality, right? We're the definition of that. We are about a better vision of America. And so that's what we're going to do this morning. Is everybody cool with that? All right, cool. All right, perfect. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a discussion around power. Because we've said that a lot, right? People, power, But I want to make sure we have a shared definition of power. And then I'm going to share with you my own story, my own path to power. As an immigrant woman, as a young girl that came to this country at 5 years old and was undocumented until IRCA of '86. And my own relationship to power and my own understanding about power and the difference that occurred in me when I made a decision that I wanted to be powerful, right? So what is power? How do we define power? Huh? No. Institutional, let's just talk about power. So power is, it depends on what kind of power, but when you hear power, what comes to mind? Institutional power. Make something happen. Getting done what needs to be done. Being influential. Having the means to control the outcome. What else? Your power. Self-empowerment. What else?
Abuse.
What is it?
Power.
Strength. What do you need? I heard what? Abuse of power. Okay. Causing change.
Power is when you can cause things to happen and you control the situation.
Power is when you can make things happen and control the situation. Knowledge is power, right? Impact. Know your rights, because it's information. Develop your own voice. Leverage. Freedom. Define what's real and what isn't. Enact policy. Right? So, it's interesting because if I were to do this conversation, if I were to have this conversation in a room with predominantly women of color, immigrant women, I'll tell you because I was there. And you'd ask me what power was, and I'll tell you. And I was in my late 20s. I told you I'm an immigrant. And my mother, I was raised by a single mother, and she worked clean hotel rooms, worked factories. I didn't come in from an activist home. I came from a hard-working immigrant home where at the end of the day it was our faith. Church was an important part of my family, those faith values, and hard work and family and helping each other out. And my mother, who had 2-3 jobs, didn't have time. She was never part of a union. I wish she would have, because maybe she would have had to work 3 jobs. But I was raised in this home where there was these key, deep, fundamental values around community, around helping others. But my family was not super politicized. We were undocumented. There was a lot of fear. And this is, back in the day in the 80s. And so, I was in junior high and high school when Mencha students from the university in San Diego State, were coming to my school to tutor. And they started introducing me to books like Occupied America by Rodolfo Acuña, Bless Mi Última by Rodolfo. And all of a sudden I was like getting introduced to Chicano history and literature and political science stuff. And I was like in junior high and high school. And that's at that age in middle school where I was going through my own identity search. Like, who am I? Am I from here? Am I from there? Where do I fit in this picture of the world? And it was this exposure to activism that began to kind of awaken my political consciousness. And so I became an activist. I was super involved with the American Friends Service Committee, going to protests around racial police brutality and the border stuff. I was an immigrant, so all the Prop 187 stuff, y'all remember that? I was just finishing high school. I was super active in the movement against Prop 187, and I was going to actions and rallies. And so I've been active. But now I'm in my late 20s and I'm at a training, and they're asked this question about power. And you know what my reaction was? Like, power, corruptive power, the white man has power, the institutions have power. And it was almost like, I was like, I want to be an activist, I want to fight the power, right? Fight the power that be, right? So I had this whole idea that power was over there, and I didn't have power. Or maybe I didn't fully understand it. I just was like, I'm fighting the power, I'm fighting for my rights. And I remember this training that I was in, it was in Chicago, and it was like, once I processed it, and it was like, you really Google, right? Somebody talking about Google power. It really is just the ability to act. The ability to act. The ability to make something happen. That's power. Now, people could corrupt power, people could use power for bad things. But those of you that are in this room, if you have the vision, ACLU vision of America, we want you to have power, because your power, collective power, is going to help us change things. But that was an interesting moment for me in my late 20s to wrestle with this idea of power. So I'm saying that because it all depends on the room you're in your own experience with institutions, with institutional racism. If you're a woman, if you're a woman of color, we all have different experiences with this notion of power. And how are we going to get self-empowered or get a sense of power if we think that maybe power might be bad? Or power is just always the oppressor, right? So one of the things I think is really important as members, as activists, as people that want to change the world, is to just take that power back. and redefine it. And understand that power really is what? The ability to act. And a couple of you said that. It's simple. That's power. Now, do you want power?
Yes.
Yes. We want power. Because that's how we move things, right? But I do that piece because it's important to have a shared definition of it. Especially if you are going to be working in communities that maybe folks haven't been super politicized or woke. And so how do we start where people are at to move them in their own sense of individual power and collective power, right? So that's thoughts, reactions. What do y'all think about that?
Power is more than the ability to act. It's the ability to get results.
That's right.
So the power really doesn't come from just one person or acting one get results.
Oh, totally. I'm just taking it really simple. I'm going to go there. Like, really, power, just the word power just means the ability to act. How you build power, and we're going to go there, how you build power, how you move change, is all about, one, you organize people or you organize money, right? Why does the labor movement have the power that it has? Because it has members, it has union dues, it has a Coke fund, like a political money. They can, that's organized people and organized money. And then you get into the strategy. The how do we move people, right? How do we build a broad coalition of folks that's not just the usual suspects? So yeah, we're going to get into all of that. But I wanted to bring it back to a little bit to the basics because sometimes not everybody's even on the same page around that. Any other thoughts around just that piece around some definitions of basic power? The enemy is feeling powerless. And I'll tell you, and I think, the brother here that did the spoken word piece was really critical. It was mad. Because part of it is, whatever's happening in the world, politically, whatever, if you feel powerless, if you feel like a victim, and you stay in that mode, and aren't able to move, who does that help? It doesn't help us, right? And it helps other folks that have other agendas. Okay, other thoughts just really quickly around power.
Sometimes there's a negative connotation to power, like absolute power corrupts absolutely, and sometimes there's a negative connotation to money. Money is the new volleyball, but not money is the new volleyball. So I think we have to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, totally. And I actually think that's a really good point. And again, power could be used for good or for bad. I'm assuming that everybody in this room wants to do good with power, right? But that's totally true. Just like money could be used for good causes or it could be used for all sorts of other things, right? I saw another.
I think I'm here today because I've been feeling disempowered, not powerless, disempowered. And I want to know how to get that power back and how to use it.
Perfect. That's why she's here, because you have the power. I'm going to take one more and then we're going to move on. Why don't you?
Speaking of the abuse of power and feeling unempowered, there's a lot of us in here, particularly in Southern California and Los Angeles, that have a lot of privilege, and privilege is power. And a lot of us white people and male people that are here have privilege that we can use economically, our connections in the entertainment industry, our connections in news, our connections in film, to stand up for and be allies for those that other people consider less than. And I think that's a really, really important way to both use to shape an abuse of power and to use the power that you have to feel less unempowered, because everyone of us, young, old, especially if you have money, especially if you have connections, all of us, especially white folks in LA, kind of do, then we can use that. And it's really, really silly for us to think we can't.
That's super important. You're going to get into more details in the issue breakout sessions around how you can use your individual power, collective power, your privilege, right? Those of us that have citizenship or legal status, especially citizenship, have a privilege from the close to 11 million folks that have a target on their back. Those of us that may, be straight and maybe, not trans, whatever, have privilege. How do we use that? So yeah, that's totally right on. Kevin, move on a little bit to, okay, power, and of course, power can be good or bad, but how do we build power? Do you want one last little comment? I'll move on. Yeah, he's gonna give you the mic. Hello? Yes.
Sorry, I was talking before. I was thinking originally the whole power. We just think of if you're a guy, or if you're right, or if you have money. When you were talking, you're saying you don't necessarily have to have money, or be white, or be an Irish, or be just being a citizen, or just the fact that you're another person.
Right. And I think what he was saying is that all of us, depending on where we sit and our own experience, have a certain privilege or access, right? And so how do we use that access and that privilege to empower in relationship, in partnership, in community with other folks that might not have that access and that privilege, right? So it's about the collective. So power, again, is just simply the ability to act. You probably can't see this unless you're super close, right? But it's our values, right? Our civil liberties, civil rights, values of inclusion, of love, all the values that move us, right? And that guide us. And it's like, how do we live our values out in the world? Is that we build power. And how do we build power? It's organized people, and that's what we're going to focus on today, and organized money. I mean, the ACLU also needs resources. The community organizations need resources, because resources keep the lights on, keep staff on. If you want to put together an action, you need money to print out flyers, right? You need money to put the signs, So money is necessary, but what we're going to focus on today, because all of you are here to figure out, what can I do? How do I claim my power? How do I build collective power? So we're going to focus today on the people power piece of it, the organized people, right? How do we find other folks that share our values, and what can we actually do? Does that make sense? So we can, this could be a week-long training. When I talked about that training that I went to in Chicago where I was wrestling with some of the stuff, it was a week-long organizing boot camp. I'm doing this in 2 hours. So just know that there's still tons of other stuff that you can process, right? So everybody good? We're ready to move on? Okay, cool. So we all have our values, right? We're going to build power. We're going to do that through organized people, organized money. Now, what are some ways that you organize people? How many people in your own network, whether it's family, friends, etc., and you said, I'm going to this action meeting or whatever, climate action, because that's what issue you're passionate about, and you're going to, drag your friend, and they're going to go, why? They share your values, but too, because you. I remember some of the first action I organized as an organizer. One of them was a 2,000 person meeting in San Diego, and we organized it in 4 months. I have a big old Mexican family. So I was like, all of you need to go, okay? 30 people, my nephews, my in-laws, it's like, you need to be there. I'm organizing this, and I literally, my sister organized a carne asada for the whole family, and then they carpooled to the action, and the action was around immigrant rights and all this stuff, and we're an immigrant family. It's like, we use our networks. We use our relationships to move people. And yes, we have these media platforms and we should use those. But at the end of the day, people are moved by people. My family, right? I got these 30 folks. These are not super political people, but they turned out and I needed their bodies there because we needed to show power and have 2,000 people in the room, have politicians there, and we were going to pin them on some commitment around immigrant rights. So I needed them there. Now, from those 30 people, I have like 2 sisters that are political, and I know they'll go to a bunch of stuff without me. So that's the work of organizing, and it's a long-term process, but we'll take what it takes. And somebody said strategy. You know, there's a difference between someone that will just go to an action for one time, right, once, to somebody that's going to be a leader, that's going to organize a meeting, that's going to have a phone tree of 10 people that they can always count on. And then one of the other pieces, and I'm going to get to it later, you know, a good leader, a good organizer is always developing other leaders. Okay? This is not about you. It's about how do you build and develop others. Because if you're the only activist always holding that sign, and you look back and there's nobody else behind you ever, I'm sorry. Check yourself. What could you do different? Because it's not sustainable. And it's not building power, right? So I totally agree. And there's going to be tons of opportunities, but every action is an opportunity to engage. And I think that our historic moment that we're in right now is that there's tons of people that want to take action and want to move. I'll give you a quick story. I'm sorry, I love to tell stories. But I have these cousins of mine, they're Mexican too, like me, immigrants, totally not political. And they're older than me, they're in their early 50s, and they've never been political. Have the same, they've made it, okay? One's like a VP at Union Bank. I mean, these are, they don't work in the nonprofit sector like me. Like they made it. When I say made it, they're financially well off. And these are like super bougie Mexican women that are my family. I'm sorry. And, you know, I love them. They're my first cousins. And they've never been to any action ever. They've never considered themselves political, whatever. They're like Gucci, you know, all that stuff. And right before the Women's March, they reach out to me. They're, hey, prima, cousin, you know, we want to go to the Women's March. We know ACLU is going to have a contingent. Can we march with ACLU? I'm like, yes, you can march with ACLU. You can also make a donation to the ACLU. So I'm like, all right, you know, yes, you can come. So the Women's March in San Diego, I know you all were like stopped and couldn't move in LA. San Diego, we had about 80,000 people, and you know, we're not LA, but it's still good, you know. So we actually ended up even missing each other because the crowds, but they were there. I still had their ACLU shirts for them. Bottom line, there's Sonia and Sylvia, right? A VP at a Union Bank, another one's, you know, runs an oncology business, something. So bottom line, they go. They're texting me right afterwards. Cousin, we've never been to anything like this in our life. We are so angry and so upset. We never thought, and they're all about all of the issues. We never thought that our right to an abortion and to contraception would be at risk. Like, they're just fired up. So they're like, can we take you out to dinner? Because we want to figure out what else can we do. Okay, these are my first cousins. So I'm like, sure, they took me out to a nice dinner, right? And check this out. They've like joined our email action. They're like, tell us, I told them we're in the process in San Diego of figuring out how we build like this Know Your Rights Ambassador program. And they're like, put us to work. We just want to figure it out. Now, I'll tell you, that's somebody that I kind of mobilized to an action. They just showed up to that one, and it's going to take work for me to move them on this ladder of leadership and engagement. So not all of us have been like political junkies forever, right? Some folks are just getting woke. So it's gonna be a process, right? And I really believe that at the end of the day, if we're the people and we're the base of this power that's so key, it's gonna be that hard work of one-on-one relationships and bringing people along and moving them along. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, I'll try not to tell no more stories, but I have a bunch. All right, so power, we already know that. So how do we organize people? That was my question. How do we organize people? How are other people, you know, how are people organized to take action? What are some means? Skills. Okay, tell me more about that. Yeah. So you tell tap into them by their skills, but then how do you figure out their skills? You have to talk to them and you know, yeah, right? You identify the common areas of interest. Yes, Alana. Social media, yes, it's a tool, and then you have to do follow-up. How do you organize people?
You adopt a model, like the social change model or whatever model of your preference, and try to implement that into action.
Okay, so you know, implement a model and you move them along. Yes.
Through education.
Education, through education. Okay. Sorry? Communication. Joining groups and guilting people. That's what I was going to say, right? We talk about abuse of power, and there's some folks that get organized because they get bribed. We're gonna have free food, so come to this action, right? In other parts of the world, I mean, I'll tell you, right? I'm from Michoacan, this little village in Mexico, and my older cousins used to tell me the story that the Mexican government, in these little rural villages in Mexico, would basically buy off people to get votes. So they'd say, we'll give you all, you know, a paved roadway into your village if you get the entire village to go and vote for us. So there are, you know, my point is that there's all kinds of ways to organize people, and some of them are bad, like put a gun on your head, you better show up, Bonnie, right, to that thing. Or you know, just bribes and fear, and that's not how we want to organize people, okay? We want to organize people by building relationships and finding shared interest, self-interest, you know, and connecting one-on-one and then moving people along, right? So we organize people by being very intentional about building relationships. And then how do we build relationships? There's a piece I want to talk about because I think some of us, and I know I struggled with this, is to understand self-interest. We organize people by identifying their self-interest, connecting that self-interest to my self-interest, right? So finding that mutual self-interest and then moving to action. Does that make sense? Right? But what is self-interest? When I say self-interest, what comes to mind? I saw somebody's hand. Yeah, what's self-interest? Surveys. Yeah, surveys. But yeah, I mean, those are tactics. Like, you can find out self-interest through that. But I'm gonna share, again, I'm taking it old school, okay? We're gonna, like, doing offline, back in the day, one-on-one, knocking doors kind of stuff, right? But yes, you could do surveys. Yeah. So you identify their self-interest, and the way you identify their self-interest is to hear their story, right? To hear their story. What else? What's self-interest? Yeah. Huh? Can you speak? I can't hear you, sorry. So, yeah, she does. Give her the mic. And is this going to be about a question, or is it about?
It's a question.
How do you identify self-interest?
It's both.
Okay.
So this group of people on Facebook, they're really like inspiring, very active, but they'll only work with people if they want exactly what they want on all fronts. And then, so I'm wondering how you convince people who.
I'm listening.
How you convince people who want to do a lot but are kind of exclusionary, so it makes everything really scattered and not as powerful as it could be.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it is through one-on-one conversations, and then sometimes you have to, you know, make a decision. If that place is exclusionary and it's not aligned with your values, then don't waste your time. Goes back to this piece around what are your values, right? What are your values? Ground you and guide you, and then you want to build power, and you want to do that through people. So if their values are misaligned with your values, then don't mess around with it. Okay, I'm going to move a little bit to self-interest because this is important. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll take.
Speaking of self-interest, there were a large number of people in the last election who voted against their self-interest. So, what do you do about that?
Yeah, we could talk about that a little bit more, and that's like a little bit of, we can have a bigger political conversation. I think a lot of that is, education, knowledge, understanding, right? But what I want to talk about a little bit here in terms of self-interest, and I'm bringing it back to us. I don't want us to be focusing on those people over there on Facebook or those people that, there's like 18% of the Latino vote, but for this president, don't remind me about that. But I don't want to talk about those people. I want to talk about us, right? Us. And so there's something that I had really struggled with when I was trying to understand this concept of self-interest, and I've come to understand it a lot more. And, there's these three little, I want you to think about it in this way. Selfless, I can't spell it, and then self-interest. So, self-interest is in the middle of someone that's selfish and someone that's completely selfless. Okay? Someone that's selfish. How is someone that's selfish? They own me, myself, and I, right? There's even a song for that. Me, myself, and I, right? Me.
Very upset about the Women's March because it was inconvenient because she worked downtown. And I said, well, there's all these people whose rights are being violated, and that's what we're marching for. And she was basically like, well, whatever.
So, a selfish person is an individualistic person. Lift myself up by the bootstraps, me, myself, and I. Does that person care about other people? No. Right? Does not care about other people. That's just right about others. So that's what a selfish person is. And there's some of those folks out there in the world, a lot of them. And then a selfless person. What's a selfless person like? Always thinking about other people. What else? When other people suffer, they also suffer. What else? That you sacrifice yourself, right? And I'll tell you, I'm sorry? What'd you say? No, it's okay. If you're really selfish, you're mentally ill. I'll tell you. This is just, this makes me a little sick sometimes. It's just like toxic, right? And I'll tell you, not in that extreme, but there's some cultural, I think there's gender issues, and then like, as women, and I know we have women here from all generations and all different backgrounds, but there's this dominant, like, raising women to think that we should be selfless, right? Have you all, I know me, I was raised like that. My single mother, immigrant, Mexican, who raised 7 kids by herself, who had a husband that was not that great. God rest his soul, my father. But she was raised to be like, you sacrifice everything for your man. You sacrifice everything for your children. It was the sense of, like, if she was going to be a good mother, good person, a good woman, she had to be completely selfless. And they raised me like that. Of course, I broke out of that real quick because I was like, hell no, But there's a lot of different cultures and families that foster this idea. I think, and again, from my experience, it's more dominant with women, where you're kind of inculcated this idea that in order for you to be a good person, you got to be selfless, and that's horrible. Because, even in relationships, how could you be in love with somebody else if you can't love yourself? How could you be part of a bigger movement if you're just, always enabling and babying? And I'll tell you, as a woman of color, I do not need a white savior to come and tell me what to do. Okay? I'm just keeping it real. So then that means you can't, this promotes patronizing, enabling, let me baby you because, oh my God, I'm gonna, I've got privilege and you don't. Nuh-uh. This is not powerful and not good. Being selfish is not powerful and not good because it's like, oh my God, you're egomaniac. All right, I have one hand over here. Sorry, I can't hear you. He's gonna bring a mic. Okay.
I disagree with what you're saying.
What do you just?
I think it's an ability to have compassion or understanding for another position. So I am not an immigrant. Do I have compassion for that? Yes, I think that makes me selfish and not weak.
Okay.
I don't think it makes you weak at all.
Okay. So she doesn't agree with me, which is fine. Hey, we're the ACLU. If we agree with each other, 80% of the time, it's all good. Let's have civil discourse and dialogue. So she doesn't agree with me in terms of a selfless person, not being a bad thing. So it's okay. We can agree to disagree. And I don't want to get into debate about that. I want to move us along to this other concept about self-interest. And I want you to think about self-interest, about it being defined as self amongst others. So it's about you and the compassion with others. It's not me, myself, and I, and it's not just poor them, but it's a combination of who I am with who Susan is, and then the collective power together, right? So that's this concept of self-interest, and this is why I'm sharing it, because a lot of times we might get stuck in these, I don't think, if you're here, you're probably not in the selfish section, right? Because you're giving of your time, you want to be involved, you want to figure out how to make a difference, so you're already thinking about change. But there is, and I'll tell you, this is just my own experience. Like, I've seen it in my own mother, and she's an immigrant, so it's not just about, being a non-immigrant and an immigrant. But there's something very challenging for a person that just does not value themselves, and it's always about the other. It's not healthy, right? And it's not good for that person. Like, I wish my mom would have been like, claimed her own freedom as a woman and power. That's true.
To be active and engaged requires a lot of energy, and if you're only doing it from some concept that you're helping other people, and it doesn't actually speak to a core issue about which you are extremely concerned yourself, for yourself and for others, it's very hard to maintain that energy.
Preach, Jane, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. That self-interest is in nature a relational concept, right? It's relational. So what we might disagree with might be gone, because this, in essence, is about being in relationship with others and finding that common ground and that common interest, and then working together for a shared goal, shared action. And there's power in that, because what happens when you feel isolated? I think I had heard, sorry, what's your name? Judy. Judy said earlier, like, I'm here because since the election, I have felt not powerless, but disempowered. So when you're stuck in yourself and what we're going through, I'm sure there's some mental health professionals in here too, right? When you're stuck in your own head about what's going on with you, it could be disempowering. But when you find someone else, Jane, you get to know her story, and all of a sudden there's energy and synergy and power that comes from that connection. So self-interest is a relational concept that really means self in relationship to others. So it's in the middle of these two, right? It's in the middle of those two concepts, okay? I see a hand, and she's been so patient, so I want her.
I just wonder, maybe it might be more helpful or somewhat helpful for the movement in organizing and building that power, instead of saying self-interest, which some people might think of it more towards the selfish or limiting common interest, social interest, maybe some other vernacular to build that?
Oh, totally. And there's all kinds of other ways. But I'm taking it back to the basics of organizing, which is going to get to one-on-one conversations. Because again, the more that we say over here, the less that we can build that. But it's totally true. Yes, Joseph.
The self-sacrificing person is actually exercising power over the people she's sacrificing for. Haven't you noticed that?
Okay. I don't want to spend a bunch of time there because we could spend a whole chunk of time on that. But, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we uncover people's self-interest, right? And we're going to so we uncover self-interest through one-on-one conversation. Like we can do a survey, but typically a survey is like, what are your skills? It's up here. I'm saying that you actually uncover self-interest when you make the time to actually be courageous and curious and interested in getting to know what makes another human being tick. So Matthew, for example, who's been sitting here in the front, I don't know anything about him. Besides the fact that he's here and he was wearing a Google sweatshirt. Right? Now I could send him a survey. But what if I were to spend 30 minutes having coffee and actually having a conversation about his story? What are some of the things I would have to be curious about Matthew to get a little bit, to establish a little bit of a deeper relationship and understanding of his self-interest, his motivations, right? So what are some of the things? So this is Matthew. What are some of the things that I would want to know? His goals. Yes. What does he aspire to do? What else? I'm sorry. His background. So 411 info, right? What's his background? His politics. His view of the world, right? That's important. I'll put all that in the end, right? But what about his heart, right? His fears, his hopes, right? His fears, Also, what is he already involved in? Is he already involved in a congregation that's progressive? Is he involved in a union? Is he involved in some other young, millennial, I'm just guessing that you're young, group? Is he part of Indivisible? Like, what are his networks? What is he already committed to? Right? Who does he know? Somebody talked about leveraging our networks and our privilege. I might, and this happens all the time, I spend some time with Matthew and then all of a sudden I know he actually knows, I'm making this up, Zuckerberg or something, and I don't know, maybe they went to college together. I'm making that up. But all of a sudden I'm having a conversation and I figure out he knows someone that we've been trying to connect to plug into our surveillance and privacy and technology. I was like, okay, Matthew. Now I'm already knowing, okay, I'm going to call Matthew to set up a meeting for me to meet Zuckerberg, right? So it's like you understand their relationships, their faith, right? Faith journey. Not all of us were raised in a faith tradition, and some of us were, and we've been gone, right? So what is their faith values, right? Culture. All that stuff. So these are some things that we learned. One hand over there.
I am a mental health professional, so this could be a little biased, but I want to know what their defining experiences are. I want to know a story that tells me what defined them, what's something that I can hold on to that's their story.
That is so powerful. Because I'll tell you, we can do a survey, we can get all the 411 in the world. Like I can tell you my 411 in 2 seconds. I was born in Michoacan, I'm number 5 of 7 kids, I'm a mother, my husband's African American, I have 3 daughters. Okay, that's 411. But do you really want to get to know Norma? There's a lot of stories here, right? There's a lot of connections here. But so it is probing deeper, and I'll tell you, I used to do faith-based organizing before coming to the ACLU for 8 years. I was part of the Gamilio Foundation, which is like PICO and IAF. Did that for 8 years, and that was my entry into formal organizing, even though I'd been an activist and all this stuff since I was a teenager. And I worked in all kinds of congregations, from like Black Baptist congregations to the UUs, to the UCCs, right, to the Catholic congregations. And it was such a trip to be in a congregation. And these are folks that go to church every Sunday, right? And my job was to build social justice ministries in these congregations. So they had the faith value connection, right? And they were literally sometimes sitting in the same pew for years and didn't know anything about each other. Anything, right? They'd go have coffee after, but it's like, their conversations like, hi, how are you doing? Hi, Bonnie, right? And never were intentional about saying, who are you? What was that experience that was transformative in your life? What informs your values? What informs your politics? What do you want to see happen in the world? Right? Another hand over here.
It'll be quick, but along the same line of privilege and compassion. I'm half white and I'm half Mexican, and I think while we connect with people, we need to be open to listening to them truly. And sometimes I will see, saying this as half white and half Mexican, white people get mad on behalf of something for Mexicans, and it's something that Mexicans aren't mad about, or something that they're not heard about. And I think we really need to understand the difference between being angry, being sad, being petulant on somebody's behalf, and being truly empathetic and being angry with them and being sad with them instead of being angry for them. Because that comes off as patronizing, and then you get dissent, and then people can't work together for a common good.
That's right, and there's no connection. I'll tell you, when I went into faith-based, so I already told you I'm Mexican, I'm an immigrant, I grew up South Bay, San Diego. I literally grew up with all people of color. San Diego, I'm sure like LA, is pretty segregated. So like you give me your zip code and I'll tell you who's your neighbor, right? And literally in San Diego, like I grew up with Mexicans, of course, African Americans, Samoans, and Filipinos. And a few of the handful of white people that were in my school, in my neighborhood, you thought they were Mexican because they would try to speak Spanish. And they were like, it was like so few of them that they were like culturally like Mexican, right? So that was my experience. And then, I went to work, went to college, and But I grew up in this, and it's almost like if I grew up in East LA, right? But I grew up in Chula Vista, National City. It's like that. So when I became a faith-based organizer with Gamilio, and I was working with like about 12 congregations throughout the county of San Diego, and I was working again, Episcopal churches, UU churches. We tried to recruit some Jewish synagogues. We were still working on it. But it wasn't until I was 28 years old, and I'm 43 now, I'll tell you my age. Yeah. It wasn't until I was 28 years old, and I had gone to college, but I was a working mom and da-da-da. And and I had friends, but it wasn't until I did faith-based organizing and worked in such diverse congregations. And I did that for 8 years. It wasn't until then, I'll tell you, that was the first time I built a relationship with a Jewish lay leader from a congregation. It's like the first time I ever met a Jewish person. Okay, and I'm 28 years old. Okay? In San Diego. It was then the first time that I met like white folks that lived in La Jolla that shared, like they were good people. It just, they weren't, we just had never connected. And through the organization and the action and the organizing was the vehicle that brought us together. And it was the first time, and I'm 28 at this time, okay, and an organizer. And it was the first time that I was able to build relationships like at deep human level, partnerships with folks that weren't of color. Okay? So like that's real. So back to this point of the young woman that's like half Mexican and half white, it's like the power of one-on-one relationships and being intentional about listening, about getting to know a person, which means you're not talking about yourself. If I want to get to know Matthew, I can't be telling him my story. I actually have to be curious about his story, right? And then because then it's like, the mental health, if you're a therapist, the therapist isn't talking to you. The therapist is listening to you. Not that we're therapists, right? We're organizers. But do you get the point, right? That you have to be intentional in listening. Yes. Sorry, he's going to get you. This doesn't go that way.
One of the areas that I think we miss in the discussion of self-interest is that you have to be able to ask and answer the question, what's in it for me? When you're engaging someone, like you said before, it's not about you, but you have to be prepared to say to this person, here's why you're going to benefit from engagement with me. This is what I can bring to you as by your self-interest. Because without that, what's their motivation?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you a little assignment because I've been talking a lot and I've been trying to engage you, and I was worried how this was going to work with so many folks, but I think we've done okay. So here's what I'm going to do, right? So we talked a little bit about, we uncover self-interest by having intentional conversations with someone else and trying to get to know not just their story, but what makes them tick, what has been a transformative moment in their life. Sometimes it's a parent's divorce, and that informed then how you relate to other people, or etc. So what I want to do, I don't know if you all have a piece of paper in your book, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and I want you to draw your own stick person, okay? For yourself. Maybe 5 minutes or 10. How much should I give him, Andres? 5? Okay, 5 minutes. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to draw the stick person, and then this is about you. And because this helps you answer, and I'm sorry, what was your name, ma'am, that just spoke? Rochelle. This is exactly what Rochelle kind of got to. We have to be able to speak to our own self-interest. Yes, we got to find other people's self-interest, but let's be honest about our own self-interest, right? I'll tell you, I'm pretty busy. I'm an executive director, San Diego. And when SoCal said they wanted to do this, they're like, Norma, will you come and do this? And I say no to a lot of things. But I'll tell you what my self-interest is. I'm an ACLU executive director. I think ACLU is the bomb. I think we're awesome. And yes, we're known for our litigation, but part of my vision and part of what I want to do is work, help ACLU really build people power. I want to grow, diversify, and activate our membership, and I want to just, right? So am I willing to get on the train to LA and be here with you all day to do this? Yes. Why? It's connected to my self-interest. You are all in my self-interest. Because my self-interest is for ACLU of SoCal to continue to be powerful and move people into action and fight back in powerful and effective ways. Because if ACLU of SoCal is powerful and strong with you at the center of it, I'm strong and powerful because we make up ACLU in California and we can make things happen. Yeah, sure. All ACLUs are different. We're doing this in San Diego. We're all a little bit different, but hey, my self-interest is that if we can do it here and we can show it, if SoCal, if Hector and Miguel can go back and say, look, we had 500 people on a Saturday, and they did this, and here's what we're seeing, and here's how it's growing. Guess what? We could get more affiliates to do it too, because some of them have never done it. You're modeling. Not only are you modeling, you're shifting and moving. So again, it's important to know our self-interest. So are you all clear about my self-interest and why you're connected to my self-interest? Okay, yes.
I think the term self-interest has been taken as very negative because it often is used that way, but the fact is, unless you're a serial killer, your interests align with the interests of almost everyone else. And the way the left has screwed up in the past is we splinter, and the Black Lives Matter doesn't matter referring to climate change. The fact is, all of it is linked together, and we are up against Mars attacks. We have a common enemy. We need to be focused together collectively and not splinter.
That's right. That's right, and that way self-interest is important. So I'm going to go back to the assignment. I need a timekeeper. So your assignment for 5 minutes is to reflect. I don't want any questions. And I want you to draw a stick person, and I want you to write, okay, what's my story? Because after this, I'm gonna pair you up with folks, okay? So do your own little stick person. What makes you tick? What was that pivotal moment? 411. But what motivates you? What angers you? What gives you hope? What are you afraid of? That's okay. It's okay to understand what makes you angry, and then how do we tap into that anger for good, right? What are your current networks? So just 5 minutes of just brainstorm, okay? And then I'll be back. Is there anybody that wants to share a little bit about themselves? Okay, I'm gonna give somebody else a chance, because she's, let's open up the space for others. Can someone help me with the mic? Because the mic only can get to like here, so is there another mic, Andres? Or somebody up here in the front? How about you? We'll start here with Jessica. Jessica, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm a survivor from domestic violence, and I'm a positive person. I love helping families. I'm an action person. I don't just talk, I do it, And I get angry when people get taken advantage of. I don't like that. And I'm also an honest person, and I love to educate myself all the time. I'm always in school too, learning things.
All right, that's a little bit about Jessica. Jessica, did you think a little bit about your self-interest? What is your self-interest?
Helping others.
Why do you like to help others?
Because I was an illegal person, and nobody helped me when I was here, and I also was bullied at school with teachers and students, and I don't want them to have that bad experience that I had.
So she wants to help people, and partly it's because of her own experience, and she doesn't want other people to go through that experience. What else? What's in it for you? What is helping others in it for you? What's in it for you? What do you get out of it besides feeling good?
Well, I get a lot of blessings. I get a job. I get my health, and it makes me feel so good inside. Very happy.
Some of these relationships maybe helped you with get a job, like with connections?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Give it up for Jessica. Okay, who else wants to share a little bit? Tanya.
Okay, great. One of the things that I shared was healthcare access, because I had being a healthy person and then having a health scare. And because everything that I list here, I wanted, and that's why I want it for other people too. So that's my self-interest. So healthcare, I want a living wage. I don't want to have to work more than 40 hours a week, because I would like to have children at some point. I'd like to actually raise them. I want to be treated with dignity and live in comfort, and so I want that for other people too. I want equity and access to jobs and schools, so that's what I want for someone else as well. I want control over what happens to my body, and that's why I advocate for women's rights and abortion. I want safety nets for people who need help, because something can happen to me, and I want to have something to rely on, not because I'm lazy, but because sometimes we go through things that really set us back. I want to live and work in a clean environment, and that's why I care about the environment. I want to be the best self that I could possibly be, and that's what I want for other people as well. And because of that, I think we need structures and opportunities to get people to that point.
So Tanya talked a lot about kind of her values and her self-interest. We didn't get to know a lot about her, but somebody's going to get paired up with her during lunch, so you'll get a chance to know more of that story. Okay, someone else. How about you right here, Socorro?
Good morning. My name is Socorro Cisneros. So, my 411, I was born here in LA, raised in South Central and East LA. I'm an identified Chicana. I come from a father who was born here, and I guess he attended segregated schools, and there was like a big push for assimilation. So ironically, he wasn't very vocal, but I got my voice from my mother, who was from Michoacan and an immigrant, right? And I'm a mother of three children. I'm married to a wonderful man who happens to be a Vietnam veteran, right? So here I am, this Chicana anti-war protester and this and that. And then I marry my husband and I'm like, you volunteered, right? but really I got to see another side and how they were just kids. They were kids just doing what they were told, and just unfortunate. So I live in a very hostile, racist environment. I live up in the high desert, like one red dot in California, or one up, where there's a Confederate flag down the road. I mean, it's just ugly. And unfortunately, my daughter's 16 years old, coming from here, we moved up there, and it's a struggle, but I've empowered her with a voice, so she'll be starting like the first human rights in her club in her high school, because MedCheck just wasn't happening. And so my voice, okay, I've been elected the chair of the Democratic Club up there, which was only like 7 members, right? I mean, this is the environment I live in. It was Brightwood, so now they're doing like a tri-community, they made me chair, and again, tomorrow's my very first meeting that I'll be chairing. I've invited like half the people there will be my family. And friends and stuff, and so I'm big on membership. My passion is a voice. Giving a voice to marginalized people, to immigrants, I have a gay daughter, I'm passionate about that. You know, I've taught her to love, and how can she be love and kumbaya in a hostile environment that's being promoted right now? I'm passionate about the labor movement, and at the moment I'm passionate about anti-Cheeto, right? Are we all? And that's about it, thank you.
Okay, I have one more person over here, and then I'll do one more in the back, because I feel bad, I don't want to leave the folks in the back. Okay, let me get you this mic over there. I feel like Vanna Brown. I'm sorry.
I just got Hi everybody, my name's Ron Pagan, and I too am from the high desert. Unfortunately for you, your community isn't as balanced as mine, because I feel very empowered in my community. My wife is a Latina woman. She grew up in Southern California, was a single mother, was on welfare for 6 months, went back to school. Now she's a full professor, so she did a heck of a job on her own. So when people bitch and moan about welfare and all these brownies and blackies that don't want to get a job, I get really upset about that. Basically, I respect everybody until they do something to change my view. I'm very curious about people. I tend to ask people things, and the next time I see them, they avert their eyes because they realize they told me a little more about themselves than they had actually wanted to. I'm a cultural Jew, meaning that I'm an atheist, but I still do the holidays because of the cultural value, and it was pretty much beat into me as a child. I do believe in science, hence my atheism. I try to understand opposing viewpoints, and I think that's really key to getting people to shift over their beliefs. When you tend to listen to others, they are more apt to listen to you, and of course some of my viewpoints have been shifted as a result of listening to others, and I can proudly say that I've been able to shift other people's viewpoints. I really object to hateful talk and racist talk. When I hear somebody saying, you know, dirty kike, dirty Jew, you know, goddamn Mexican, whatever, I'm the first to speak up, and I just tell them that isn't appropriate, and I'm not going to listen to it. So I don't care if I'm in line at Walmart or if I'm in Starbucks with a friend who gets a little rowdy. I take that, I go that route. As I mentioned earlier, I love my community, but I do want to make it better. I think I mentioned my mom raised me alone. I love women. I mean, I'm married to a woman, but I love and respect women because I realized my mom worked 3 jobs to keep me on the street. We lived in the Roslyn Hotel right down the street in downtown LA. We were very poor. When I tell people I was poor, they don't realize I was tenement poor, but that's how poor we are. But my mom worked. She made sure that I had an education. She read to me. She did everything she should. Also, I lost my son. He was 12 years old. He would have been 38 years old on the 21st of this month. So pre-existing conditions are very, very, very important to me on that level because it's very personal to me. And that's my story in a nutshell.
And I'll tell you, right, well, we're going to have a person in the back, and I'm going to model a one-on-one, and then I'm going to give instructions because during lunch, we're going to ask you to find somebody that you don't already know, grab your lunch, and have a one-on-one conversation, which means take turns getting to know each other and trying to uncover, kind of your motivation, your self-interest, your values, your connections. So we're going to have, you just pick somebody out, raise your hand in the back, we're going to have one person in the back, so, yeah.
I have my first son when I was 16. I have 4 boys, and my baby's from Berkeley.
Can you speak up a little bit closer?
My oldest son graduated from Berkeley, and I grew up in Ojai, which is pretty much all white, and never really had an issue until I was older and moved away. And I think the first time that I started realizing the color of my skin was I went to Hawaii, and I got upgrades all over the place. Man, people gave me, they thought I was local. I got ocean view rooms, what island are you coming from? And my first thought was, this must be what white people feel like. And I was like, this is awesome. No wonder they don't want, brown people to they don't want to lose that. But what really scared me is after this election is my kids, their father is white, and 3 of them look white, and I have 1 darker skinned son. And I thought, I'm so happy that my sons look white. And that horrified me. And at that point I thought, I have to do something. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but that's why I'm here.
Thank you for being here. We actually have a little bit more time, and I want to be fair to the folks in the back. There's 2 hands. We'll do 2 more people in the back. So, isn't this great? I love people.
Hey everybody, my name's Lindsay. I'm from Las Vegas originally. I work in homelessness and mental health advocacy. I lost a parent to homelessness and mental health issues, and I've also been a survivor of it myself. And what I get out of it is being in a position to impact someone so that they're not in the position that I got myself out of. So it's selfish in that kind of way. I call it my selfish selflessness, and that, yeah, it makes me feel good, but I'm still around here for a reason, so I gotta pass that on. So yeah.
Thank you. All right, 1 or 2 more people in the back. We're doing good on time.
Hi, my name is Shrita. I'm a first-generation American here, and my parents are from Sri Lanka, a third world country, and growing up in a predominantly white area, I always felt kind of ashamed of my skin tone. I always felt the stigmatism. And I visited Sri Lanka a lot. It's a third world country, right?
Hold it closer.
Sorry. So it's very different from everything here. And so I guess why I'm interested in making a difference in having an egalitarian society is the fact that I recognize my privilege being an American. Even though it's a little bit embarrassing right now, I recognize that I'm lucky to live in society. I'm lucky to have freedom of speech and not get shot for it. I currently work for Amnesty International as a county clerk, and I'm constantly advocating and fighting for human rights, and I'm trying to kind of connect with people's self-interested values. And then I also come across those people that are Trump supporters every day that culture that are just selfish. It's just, I want to learn more about how to get across to these people that we can't continue to do this. There's for a greater good. Like long term, like this is, I fear oppression. And it's just what America's been based off of for so long. It's really upsetting.
Thank you for being here. And definitely, you know, part of this tool is about finding people that share your values that you can move to action. But I really think that some of these tools, once we get to practicing the one-on-ones, you know, we have to figure out how to have conversations with people that don't think exactly like us. And, you know, how do we, because at the end of the day, it's really about changing hearts and minds. And I mean, we're lucky to live in California, right? How many of you are like super proud of right? We're like leading the resistance. But it's like, you know, I've had friends of mine who are organizers who are white. They're like, I think I want to go to Alabama and like do some work. Like, you know, it's going to take time. But I really do believe that the real power is the power of the people. And it's just how do we make time to do that. So we're going to have find one more person, and then we're going to move on real quick. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, they're passing the mic. All right.
Turn on. Hi, I'm Laura Matthews. One of my core values is fairness. I am a white woman from the suburbs of Chicago, and I've always had a very high opinion of myself. That my success is my success, and aren't I the bomb? And I gradually have become more and more alive to how unfair things are, and especially a moment where a girlfriend of mine who's black, she chooses to wear her head shaved. She looks great. She has a beautiful head. And she gets pulled over all the time because they think she's a man. They think she's a black man. And in her card, she told me this story, and I became so angry that things are not fair. And then I became very ashamed of my own participation in and success that I thought was due to me really being a part of this. I mean, maybe I would still have been successful. I'll never know, but the system hasn't been fair. So for me, the thing that's empowering me is I just want to do everything I can to just make it as fair as possible so we all have a level playing field, and then I can see if I'm actually as cool as I thought I was.
Wow, that's great. All right. So again, I'm not going to have time for more examples. I'm sorry. You will have plenty of time. But I'll tell you, this is taking it back to basics. This is before Facebook. This is before even cell phones. This is when you look at other big movements, right? Historic movements, whether it was the women's rights movement, civil rights movement, all that stuff. Man, people were talking to people all the time. And it's work. The work of canvassing, the work of figuring out how you get folks to action. How do you find people that share values was super critical, right? So what I'm going to do, sorry, I don't have any more time. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to model a one-on-one, and I'm going to do this in 10 minutes. Typically, I recommend that for intentional one-on-one conversations, they're 30 minutes. And the purpose of a conversation, there's three kind of, for those of you that are like the very clear outcomes, you know, the outcomes or purpose or intention of scheduling a one-on-one with somebody, there's three things. One is you want to initiate a relationship, right? You want to kind of open the door to establish a relationship. Hopefully you don't blow it and they'll want to meet with you again, right? So it's number one, you want to initiate a relationship. And you're going to do that by getting to know that person, right? I'm going to model this in a shorter version in a minute. So that's the number one thing. You want to initiate a relationship, open that door for connection and partnership. And again, hopefully they don't shut it in your face and never answer your call. You want to uncover their self-interest. And we got into it a little bit, and we can debate whether that's a term. But at the end of the day, again, remember self-interest, and I think it was Jane that said it. It's like, it's about understanding, one, what makes that person tick? What do they care about? What are they angry? I'll give you an example. I think it was Ron. Was it Ron? I'll tell you, just from hearing him introduce himself in 1 or 2 minutes, I know that if I'm going to be fighting, you know, ACA and like trying to stop them from, do you think I'm going to be able to engage them to fight that fight for healthcare? I mean, what a story, right? So it's like, finding that self-interest. What is that story? Knowing that Jessica said it in a powerful way, that she's a survivor of domestic violence. Do you think I'm going to be able to engage Jessica around women's rights and around healthcare? Right? Right? So it's just like you're uncovering your self-interest. So that's the second goal, right? Number 1, initiate a relationship. Number 2, begin to uncover their self-interest. Okay? And then number 3, which is super important, is you want to explore collective opportunities for action, right? You want to build that, and again, the relationship building process, it's a process. You don't have a one-on-one conversation and be like, all right, I know I can count on Susan every single time I call her to turn out to this rally or to turn out to this legislative meeting or to go whatever. But if I build this relationship and then I know what her interests are and I figure out, and then she keeps coming and coming and coming, that's when you begin to build that ladder of deeper engagement, and you can count on her all the time, and you can say, okay, now I have 5 people I can always count on. I'm going to grow that, right? So does everybody understand the kind of the outcomes of intentional conversations, or those 3 things? Initiate a relationship, uncover their self-interest, and explore collective opportunities for action. Yes? I don't know if it'll work, but
coming privilege as a white woman who's cisgendered, heterosexual, when I've tried to have one-on-one conversations, for example, I have two friends who are transgender women of color, and sometimes it just feels like I'm self-serving, trying to pluck all this information from them so I can learn more because my experience is nothing like theirs. So I just want to get some insight as to how to make sure that it's genuine and that I'm not just like interviewing someone so that I can learn. You know what I mean?
That is the art of good one-on-one conversations, because you don't. But I'll tell you, you gotta find that balance, and you should even make that very clear from the very beginning. Like, look, I want to get to know you and know your experience, but I would love to have an opportunity to share with you a little bit about who I am, why I'm here, and what I'm so pissed off about, right? So I think being really straight up from the very beginning. The reason why it's important, though, because you're aware of that. I'm a talker. I'm an organizer and I'm a talker, okay? And so you also have to be very intentional to, like, if you're gonna have 30 minutes, you don't want it to be all about you. So you do have to you have to strike kind of a balance of being really, delving deeply into getting to know that person, but you don't want to be like a robot and like not say anything about you. So you want to open the door for rapport and connection, right? But that's a great question. Okay, so everybody clear about what we're going to do. So now I'm going to ask for a volunteer. And actually be interested, right? Because I'm a woman of color, immigrant, pretty cool. So so I want to find somebody that is very different than me. Maybe a white male. I'm sorry. Yeah, you know what, Matthew? Because he's been here and I've been totally curious about him. So come on, Matthew. He's younger too. Okay, so get him a mic. All right, so I'm gonna do like a total keep time, Andres, like 10 minutes. So this is, we're just like we're role playing, but it's real. Like it's not like it's not gonna be like fake the funk. Like this is real, but we're just gonna pretend like they're not all here and you and I are like at a coffee shop, okay? And we're gonna just have a conversation, but obviously, and then this is a little bit different because you have like 400 people like staring at you, so it might be a little bit intimidating, right? But the way we're gonna do this is that, and if you want, because we have like 10 minutes, maybe we could do 15, so that I could do 10 minutes of like getting to know you, and then I'll give you like 5 minutes to ask me questions. That way we could, practice a little bit of that, right? So this is a role play, but it's not like we're faking the funk. It's real. It's a real conversation, okay? So is that cool? All right, so we're gonna get started, and then hope somebody keeps track of time. Okay. All right. How are you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing well, I suppose. It's a nice day.
It's a nice day. So Well, you're the first person I saw when I got here because you're right on the front row. So tell me a little bit about, what brought you here today.
So for years I kind of thought that there were other people, fighting the good fight, and like during the Obama years I was generally pretty happy, despite there were things still worth fighting for. But with, I guess, the election of Trump, it kind of woke me up that maybe I should or try to make the actions that I would like to see in the world. So now I'm here trying to figure out how I can actually do that, so I can kind of have some agency, I suppose. Make myself feel a little bit better that when there's a tragedy, I know that I can do something about it, and I'm not just kind of wallowing.
Wow. So tell me a little bit, Matthew, of tell me a little bit about you, like in terms of like your background, and like what informed your values and like your politics. Tell me a little bit more about yourself and your family.
So I was born in Missouri, and I lived there up until like two years ago or so. So I was lucky to have a lot of very good teachers who kind of told me just how lucky I really was. I was born to a middle-class family. Obviously, I wasn't, showered with riches or anything, but we definitely got by. And I was able to go to a great school. I was able to go pursue a degree in computer science. And that actually opened up a lot of doors in tech. I was able to get an internship down in Alabama, where their values didn't typically match up with mine. And that kind of informed me that a lot of people have a lot of different life experiences that I don't share with them, and I don't know how they got to where they are without walking a mile in their shoes, effectively. So just this breadth of human experience that I cannot ever actually experience, I want to know those stories so I know how we can reach a compromise.
So you're from Missouri, and middle class family, and was your family like super active politically, or were they involved in any kind of social movements, or?
No, like my father worked with the juvenile system, so he was kind of in tune with the, I guess, political landscape of like the town, but they weren't really politically active. They would, like, my dad would get outraged at the news, but he wouldn't really go any farther. So I was definitely aware of the goings-ons, but I didn't really have that basis to know what can I actually do about it.
And are you like, do you have siblings, or?
Yeah, so I have one younger brother who's doing, I think he's music therapy now. He was in music education. I'm not entirely sure what he's going to end up settling on, but yeah, he's 3 years younger than me, still in Missouri.
So you talked a little bit of like the selection, like before it's like, oh my God, everybody has rights or whatever, maybe I don't need to do anything, but given all of the threats and what we're seeing and all the battles that we have, like, what are the issues that you are the most angry about, concerned about, and like ready to like take action around? Is there any in particular that like tug at your heart, kind of thing?
Yeah, so especially now that I'm, I guess, working in tech out here, a lot of my friends are from India, they're from abroad, like, so I'm getting a lot of different viewpoints. And for the longest time, like, foreign affairs have kind of been my key issue, I suppose. And I feel like we become a whole lot safer when we treat each other as neighbors and citizens of the world, as opposed to, well, you're from another country, you're like the enemy, you're the foe, or you're even just a competitor. Like, I feel like the more we communicate with one another across national bounds, the more that we can settle our differences by talking to each other, as opposed to talking past each other and just building up this rhetoric. And I feel that makes us a lot safer in general when we reach out a hand, as opposed to withdrawing within ourselves and demonizing the other.
So I mean, there's obviously a big chunk of the country that doesn't share your values, right? But can you think of a time in your life where there was like some transformative experience or some like aha moment for you in particular, like a story around it that just kind of was like, that really kind of informed your view of your values and how you want to live in the world?
Yeah, so I guess in high school, I was definitely politically active, but I mean, where I was born is like 90% white, like middle class, like it wasn't a very diverse area, and I actually had a teacher. I think I couldn't remember what like book we were discussing, but the topic of like affirmative action came up, and me thinking I was this smart know-it-all, like I was like, well, isn't that discriminatory? Isn't that like reverse racism or something? And my teacher just completely called me out, and I'm so appreciative. Like I still remember this moment. She's like, you don't understand how lucky you have it. You're a white man, you don't even understand the privileges you've been given. That really made me reevaluate, like, well, what has my life been like? What do I have that other people don't have? And it really shifted my view from that point on, just to think of, so what have I experienced that other people have not, and that they've not been able to leverage? And that like really made me feel like gross after that, just being like awoken to the idea that not everyone has lived the same life, and people are having to work through high school. Like I've had it very easy, and the fact that others have not, I feel like I have a responsibility to do something to, I guess, help those who are less fortunate.
So you were in high school when the teacher kind of asked you that, and you did that like self-reflection, and were you able to think of something that you didn't have or that you had to struggle for? Like when you did that reflection, like I'm just kind of curious, because I can't relate to that. So, but like when you did that reflection, like did you ever, was there anything that came to mind around like, this is what was bad for me? Like, was there anything that you were able to identify?
I mean, so not at that point. Later on, like my family, I was raised Methodist, I suppose, but over time I didn't want to wake up on Sunday mornings, and one thing led to another, and like I don't really affiliate with like an organized religion. So when I was actually in Alabama, like not even to me, but like we were playing poker with some friends, and they started talking about how you need a religion in order to like inform a moral viewpoint on the world, and if you don't have a religion, there's nothing holding you accountable. So like even though I wasn't directly targeted by that, I was just listening to that and just soaking it in. It just like made me so mad that like they thought that I couldn't be a good person because I didn't go to a church, I didn't attend a congregation, and like I consider that minor in the big scope of like the big spectrum of things. Like if that's the only thing I've had to experience, like I'm still incredibly lucky, but that definitely kind of informed me of like these are people who I guess maybe haven't met that many people who aren't a part of a church, and what can I do to show them that I can still be a good person? What can I do to expand their viewpoint, make them more aware of other experiences, kind of like how I was woken to the fact that I also have lived a very insulated life.
Matthew, so obviously Missouri, a predominantly kind of white community, and now LA, right? Are you in LA? Where are you?
Yeah, so I'm in K-Town now.
K-Town, Koreatown?
Yeah.
Okay, so very diverse, right?
Yes.
So what has that experience been like for you? And I know you were in Alabama before, you've been in other parts of the country, but those parts of the country are countries parts that we've got to change. But I'd like to hear a little bit from you around kind of the experience of going from a predominantly white environment to Southern California or Los Angeles. How has that been for you?
Oh, I mean, it's actually been tremendous. Like, just the fact that I can go to work, and half the people I'm working with either weren't born here or they moved to LA for any number of reasons. Like, the diversity of the stories it's just tremendous. Like, I didn't experience that in Springfield. Everyone who's lived in Springfield they were born there, their parents were born there, their grandparents were born there. Like, there was like almost no diversity of experience. So now that I'm here, everyone has a very unique experience. Like, how did they get here? Were they born and raised here? Did they come here from another country? It's just tremendous, the number of stories I can, I guess, learn about, collect, and understand. And it broadens my understanding of the world, and I really appreciate that.
Have you been challenged by that change? To be like around all these people that think different than you, that have, what's been the most challenging thing for you personally? Like, because it's great, you've got all these stories, but my thought is like, has anything challenged you? Has there been anything that, challenged you a bit around that?
Yeah, so, one thing I never had to experience when I was in the Midwest was like green cards. a lot of my friends, a couple of them actually got laid off from work, just unexpectedly, and they were then faced with, well, they need to find another job within a month, or their family could be completely uprooted. And just the fact that this could happen, that the system was built in such a way that people could come to this country, could be living a life, build a family, and then just so easily it can all be just thrown away, thrown into jeopardy at the very least, is like, it shocked me that this was legal, that this could happen. And that was an issue I wasn't even aware of before coming here.
How are we doing on time? We're good?
We're fine.
Is it 10 minutes?
About 10 minutes.
Wow. What do y'all think? Get up, Matthew. So did you all learn a little bit more about Matthew? I totally want to spend more time with Matthew, because these are exactly the kinds of individuals we need to talk to, right? Because, so let me ask you all, so what did you all think of this one-on-one conversation? And he didn't even get to ask me anything. Okay, I don't know who has a mic, but somebody needs to. What did you all think? How was this for you? So good? All right, good. Was it different than, where do you work? Where did you go to school? How old you are? I didn't even get his age, but I know he's way younger than me. Okay? Anybody else that wants to kind of just reflect on kind of what you saw and heard and felt? And how'd you feel about our conversation?
It's good. It's therapeutic.
No, but if I reached out to you and said, hey, Matthew, I kind of want to talk to you a little bit more, you'd give me an appointment to have coffee.
It didn't feel like you were crying a ton, because I just got to share my story, which obviously everyone wants to share. So
yeah. And it didn't feel like, in therapy, but I wasn't too counselly, was I? Any other thoughts about what you saw, Stephanie?
I think you illustrated here your whole point of view of how meeting people who are a little different from you can change your views, like you did. You started with Missouri.
Put it closer to your mouth.
You started with people in different locations in the U.S. with different ways of believing and acting, and just how that interaction already, if you can talk calmly and to name calling and the rest.
Totally.
They learn for it, and it creates, a more peaceful world.
Perfect. Okay, I'll take one more right here. Thank you, Matthew. Matthew's working.
It was such a great conversation, but it was real clear to me that it worked because you both had the same expectation at the beginning. Whereas if I sat down with this lady and we just happened to sit next to each other and I launched in without getting her agreement, it would not be a comfortable conversation.
And that's actually true. That's a great point. Okay, and I'm going to get into a couple other instructions, and then what time? How are we doing on time? Perfect. And then I'm going to give you all instructions. But Matthew, any other things you want to say about our conversation? Did you feel like, who is this? It was fine, right? It didn't feel like I was just, patronizing and just kind of getting in your head, right?
It didn't feel like 10 minutes, so.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Give a round to Matthew, right? Okay, cool. Thank you, Matthew. I think that's a really good question that you just asked, right? So, obviously, we're, at a day-long ACLU training, so everybody that's here knows that they're here to figure out how to move other people to take action. So it should be easier. But I don't walk around, even though I kind of do. I'm kind of a little bit like that, an organizer. So sometimes I'll be at 7-Eleven. Actually, one time at 7-Eleven, there was this young African-American young man. It was right before the election, and I ended up registering him to vote. We were getting coffee. And it was just hey, how are you doing? And it was literally 3 days before the deadline. I won't tell you that story. But bottom line, I am kind of just curious about people. Every time I'm in a cab or, I'm just hey, so where are you from? It's just I'm this is just part of my DNA, but I've been an organizer for a long time. But I think, there's two things, right, around doing these kinds of conversations. One is that you've got to be intentional about it. right? And there's going to be some work that you all do a little bit later where you can map out like who are the 10 folks maybe in your own community that you want to like, intentionally reach out to, that you can schedule one-on-ones. And then how do you schedule one-on-ones? So if, is it Stefan? So like say Stefan's on my list because he lives in my neighborhood and I'm trying to find other people that might share my values. I'm gonna be like, hey Stefan, I'm super active with the ACLU and I'm like so fired up about what's happening. Do you want to go grab coffee? Because I really want to kind of get to know who you, what you care about and what you're thinking, what you're involved with, because I kind of have a feeling that you and I might be able to like do some stuff together, right? So you kind of have to like schedule the meeting and kind of give folks heads up that you're trying to, get to know them a little bit more. You're trying to, and sometimes even at work, like you'll see folks that, obviously I work for the ACLU, but like my cousins, I'll take you back to my, foofy Mexican cousins. One of them was saying when we had, I hope this is not being Facebook Live, because what if they watch it? Sorry. Oh God, I just thought about that. So I was like, oops. Oh God, all right. Yeah, don't put that online. No. Oh man. All right. So one of the things she said is like, she works at Union Bank, and I actually found out. I didn't even know this. She, we're nonpartisan, but she was a Bernie supporter, and but it was the Women's March was her first action. But it's so funny because she goes, with the election, I've been so angry, I've been so upset, and then I found out that like, whatever, somebody else in her office, she's also fired up because she talked about going to the Women's March, right? So it's like, you also, I think now, given what we're facing, more and more people are like in random places that they're not super activisty or whatever, but they're like, ¿qué puedo hacer? What can I do? And so those are the kinds of people you're going to want to be intentional about having conversations with. So yes, I agree. This was, but I mean, don't just go around random people and like put them in a corner. And you're going to have to be thoughtful about who are the folks you're going to reach out to and how do you build your little network of folks that you can engage in action, right? So real quick, because I know you guys are all burning. So there's two things I want to remind you of. So to have one-on-one conversations, you need two kind of big guiding, values or principles. And one is that you have to be really curious about people. This is not about you. This is really about getting to know someone else's story. And I think something Matthew said was really great. It's like, when you get a chance to hear all these other stories, there's something powerful, right? Like, there's the story he shared about, he was raised Methodist, the conversation, like that's a story I'm going to remember about Matthew, right? And or his teacher's story. Like, so it's really important that these conversations are about getting as many stories as possible. Like, we have to move from the who, what, when, and where to like the more depth, the more, stories of what their life experience has been and their values. So you have to be really curious, and that's why it's like, it's about you asking that person questions. The other thing you have to be is courageous. Did I show any little courage in this conversation with Matthew? Did you guys see any moment? What was a moment of maybe a little bit of courage? Where I could have, I could have dodged and gone somewhere else, but...
Well, you asked him if he was challenged by any of his experiences.
That was I could have been like, all right, cool, white young man from Missouri, now in LA, cool, and it's all good, he heard all these stories, but it probed a little deeper, and that takes courage. That takes courage to go kind of a little deeper, and you want to be mindful, you don't want to, and folks always say like, oh my God, what if I'm intruding, and what if I'm getting into too much personal stuff? Keep it high level, but keep it deep. So, you figure that out yourself. But my experience is that most human beings are thirsty to tell their story. They're thirsty to have someone listen to them and connect. We're human beings. We're made to be in relationship with each other. So so don't worry about that, and then just trust yourself and trust your gut and be really kind of rooted in who you are and be honest. So it was, I think somebody over here saying, if I'm doing this and I'm a white woman, straight, just be honest. Like, look, here's what I'm afraid. I don't want to come across like this, so please check me if you need to check me. Like, be honest. Just keep it real, right? So remember those two things. Be courageous and be curious about people, right? So here's what we're going to do for lunch, because I think we're pretty much kind of done with this piece. We're going to debrief after lunch, and then after the issue teams are going to have a little bit of like time for you to be thinking about, who are the folks in my own neighborhood, in my own block, in my own community, and that I need to be intentional about engaging them. Because imagine there's like 450 people here, right? Or 400, I don't know, a couple empty seats. If each of you is intentional of building 10 relationships, just say 10, because it's easier math. We should be able to pack a room with 5,000 people and then hold elected officials accountable, right? So it can't just be the organizers, it can't just be the staff, it can't just be that one person that's super active. It's gonna take all of us. I think Hector said it great. It's like the power of our democracy is the people, and we are the people, right? And so let's find other people too that share our values. So in terms of what's gonna happen for lunch is, I think the lunches are gonna be over there. And we don't have time, like we're not gonna tell you who to find, but we want you to go grab your lunch and then find somebody that you do not know after you get your lunch, maybe while you guys are in line getting your lunch. And there's plenty of benches. You don't have to come here to the sun, even though, the sun's good. But, there's lots of benches. You're gonna have till what time? Till 1:30 they have to be back. Yeah. So you'll have literally a good break. So you're gonna have 15 minutes to go get your food. And what's for lunch? Okay, he'll give instructions. So you're gonna get your food, but here's what I want you to know. Please don't go somewhere and sit by yourself. And please don't go somewhere and sit with your spouse. How many actually followed the instructions and talked to somebody and did a one-on-one? Okay. It's okay if you didn't. I won't, go after you. So that's good, right? And how was that? I saw some folks that didn't even want to stop. We kind of had to go get them. So how was that experience of spending that time and being intentional about getting to know another person who is obviously here? So who wants to, what do you think? Well, you're chewing, so. Okay, who wants to share with us a little bit about how the experience was and kind of who you met a little bit and just.
So I met Susan here, and we're both mothers, and I think that's the primary reason that brought us into the level of activism that we are going to be doing in the future. It's for our children, because I think you as a mother or parent knows that feeling. But Susan's a bit younger than me, so her children are younger, and it was like opening a window to somebody else's life, and just to hear these stories, it's so real, and what a beautiful person she is, and beautiful children, beautiful mother. So,
and did you find, obviously you connected as mothers and values, but did you see any opportunities of like some things that you all might do together?
Well, we're Facebook friends. We're both political on Facebook now, so we're going to be able to share there. We're geographically pretty far spread apart. We both work full time. She's raising 4 little babies, but I am hoping to continue to be able to connect with her on Facebook because I'm that much further ahead. I can help her with some stuff, getting her kids into college, things like that,
Great. Okay, who else wants to share kind of their experience? And I don't know if the mic will work all the way over here, but I'll try.
Hi, I'm Cece. I had a great lunch. Shout out to IUME, wherever you are. It was interesting to me to see the different levels of activism. Of some people want to really get involved, and some people don't really know how to get involved and are looking for ways to get involved. And she was saying to me, like, I don't know, like sometimes I feel like maybe one person can't make a difference. And I was sharing with her my experience of, I am kind of a big mouth, and I'll go to a dinner party and say, so how's everyone voting on Measure X? Yeah. And then trying to get those 10 people to vote no on Measure S. My question though is, and my friends and I have this question a lot, is when you're talking to people and trying to find that commonality, is it better to try to energize people that share your view or the things that you find that you can have in common with them? Or is it about changing hearts and minds? I have tried to have conversations with my family who is very religious, and my mother can't see past voting for somebody unless they're pro-life. So no matter whatever their other policies are, and I can try to engage with her about those policies, but if they're not pro-life, she's stuck. So is it about trying to energize people that are like-minded, or trying to help somebody else change their mind?
I think we're here because we want to engage people that are like-minded. And we all have those folks in our lives, right? I have a brother who's a corrections officer. Like, literally, we can't even talk politics, okay? And it's just like, I'm not going to waste my time, my energy. They're still your family or your neighbor, so you kind of have to deal. But really, I think today is about, like, the power of people that share our values of inclusion, of full equality for everyone. You know what I'm saying? So it's about really being intentional about making time to connect with those folks and then moving into action. Like, hey, we're gonna have to call our city council person, or we might have to go pack, the mayor's office because the mayor doesn't want to declare LA a sanctuary city. Whatever that is, but it's through relationships with folks that share your values. And the other folks, we all have to deal with them, right? They're in our lives. It's just, there's some battles that you just choose not to But there are some folks in the middle that a lot of times they've never had a conversation with anybody, right? So like I've had experiences of talking to someone that's like never met an immigrant before, and so maybe they were like, they used the word illegal and whatever, but they never had met face to face a person who could share like their immigrant story. And so there is a value, it's just like, we also don't want to just always be preaching to the choir and talking to ourselves. So there is this balance. But I think for today, it is going to be, and you're going to get later on in the afternoon, more really concrete ways of like, here's what ACLU is doing, here's the battles that we're fighting, here's what we need you to help us do, right? Okay, a couple other folks. How was your lunch? How was your one-on-one? Somebody that hasn't spoken yet. How about you? It's okay? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I can't hear you.
It was great, just generally speaking, and I think it's one of the things that I always find interesting is when, we have, as human beings, we have a natural habit to make assumptions about people and judge just whatever it is, and then you end up having a conversation with someone and you find that there's all of these places and ways in which you connect and you learn something from them, or they're fascinating, and, you have no idea you have no access to that until you have a conversation. And so that was one of the things that I thought was really interesting. And then also how ultimately, like, we're all resources for different things, and you'll never know what someone is a resource for unless you ask. And it was interesting that, the woman that I shared with, we both had this notion of like the idea of there being pen pals from people across divides and how you create connection. It was just interesting to see, the way both of our minds were working in a similar direction, and the amount of values that we share just about basic human experience and human rights. And I think, certainly we're in like-minded communities, so it's a lot easier to find that. But I feel like there's a lot, if we drop below the storyline, that we all really do share, of just wanting love, wanting self-respect, wanting to feel safe, and that there's always that common ground that we can connect on.
So any other folk on this side about how I'm going to skip you because you raised your hand a lot. I'm trying to get other voices here.
I actually just wanted to, I had a good talk with a woman named Darlene. I'm not sure where she is right now, but found out she's actually in the San Fernando Valley, where I've been working with your chapter recently, and so got her added on the mailing list at least, or will be. I did want to sort of address that question of, you talked about trying to find like-minded people, and it's important for us to identify ourselves and say, we're part of this. But it's also sort of, ultimately, the Bill of Rights that most of the ACLU that's the work of the ACLU is defending, right? It's saying, we have a right to press, to free press, to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and so on, was agreed upon. And ultimately, I also think we're going to have to find some way of finding those areas of common agreement in order to move the country I think it's important for us to be heard. I think the marches have been great, but I also think we have to find some way of communicating to those people across the aisle. I'm dealing with my family in Arizona. I'm completely on the opposite side of them, and it's difficult. And I'm just not. It's the biggest question in my mind right now.
I think we're going to have to do both things. And I think the reality, I don't know how you all have been feeling since the election and then the inauguration. It's been, 35 weeks and a day since the inauguration. And for a while I was counting days. But how do we sustain ourselves emotionally, right? And just how do we sustain the work? Because it's so draining. Like every single day we wake up and we don't know what's going to happen next, and every single right that we have fought for to fulfill the promise of the Bill of Rights is under attack, right? I mean, you heard it from Hector early on. And so this is a battle in a time that we're in our history that we're going to have to find a balance of figuring out how we do both. How do we engage, activate, mobilize people that share our values of what this country is about and ought to be about, and how we continue to move forward and not backwards, but we're like in the heart of the resistance. So we're gonna have to figure that out, and that's the people that we have to connect to, that share our values, that we get plugged into our chapters and da-da-da-da. And then these tougher conversations, sometimes in our own family, have to happen too, but I do think we can't just do that, because it's draining. It is literally draining. And so you're just gonna have to find that balance, right? And continue to, but I think in order for us to be resilient and survive, and many folks have been through this in other times of our history, like you're gonna have to figure out how you do it in a way where you sustain yourself and don't burn yourself out and don't go into a deep depression, right? So, Joseph.
I have become an activist in the last 3 or 4 months, I guess. I basically came out of the intelligence world some years ago. I'm really not as old as I look. But I lived through the Berlin Wall and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I thought I would never be so scared again. We're fighting for the life of the country. Seriously. And we've got to be careful as Democrats that we don't get fragmented and concentrate on changing the color of the Congress first. There's nothing to get in our way.
Well, many folks are just waking up. I just want to clarify, ACLU is a nonpartisan organization. We are about defending the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And, most folks tend to lean a certain way, but we do, work on, especially folks that are more conservative in values around some of our surveillance and privacy work. So I just wanted to say that just for the record, so you all know that. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see your name. Daniela.
While I'm all for protecting the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, I also think it's important to note that there are certain communities who get targeted more frequently than, say, people of more privileged communities. So while, yes, freedom of speech is important and freedom to protest is important, let's also realize that Black Lives Matter protests are met with police officers, and right here, while the women's march that happened a few weeks ago was very peaceful. So I think it's important that we note the differences in who is getting protected for our rights. So thank you.
And there was somebody else, I think it was earlier, and of course I can look it up, but we all know that famous poem, right? First they came for, yes, well, who was it? Yeah, first they came for the communists, then they came for, and it's been updated. So the whole, I think what ACLU stands for is the protection of everybody's right, and recognizing that there's privilege, recognizing that there's institutional racism, and figuring out how we kind of do that together. Okay, I'm going to have one more person kind of just talk a little bit about their experience during lunch.
I had a great conversation with Anna, and we sort of connected over a shared experience coming from privileged communities in Southern California and what it's like to be a teenager whose sort of entire existence is defined by sort of school and the world that you live in, and coming into the world, and whether it's going to school on the other side of town in Los Angeles, like Adam did, or going to school on the other side of the country, like I did, that coming to understand more about your community and care about your community is kind of also how you become politically awakened, is just by learning about other people and coming to care for them, and that's also been really beneficial and wonderful for both of us to actually know our communities and know the world, and that's what kind of brought us here.
Great. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up, and I'm gonna leave you with two. I think, and the last, like I said, I think it's been 5 weeks and a day since the inauguration, and you're gonna hear from our issue experts that lead all of our kind of priority projects at the ACLU in a minute. But you all know what happened, right? A week after the inauguration, and the first executive order was signed and all that stuff. And everybody went into rapid response mode. How many of you went to the airport, to LAX? Yes. Right? And of course you all saw Peter Biebring and Jenny and everybody out there, like, doing all the legal work, right? And so it took all of us to figure out how we moved into action and used all of the tools at our disposal, which was the people at the airports and the litigators, at the airports, to figure out how the heck we could challenge that and stop that and make that happen. So there's a great quote from Omar, I can't pronounce his name, but he's the new director of our Immigrant Rights Project for ACLU National. And he posted this on Twitter, and he said, this is after the Ninth Circuit, made the decision to support the Washington decision and the stay on the Muslim ban, the travel ban. And so he said, don't get complacent on the Muslim ban. The people do the work in the streets. I added that. The people do the work in the streets, and the courts follow. If you came out, you are why we are winning. Do not stop. This is not the time, right? Do not stop. This is not the time for us to be complacent. This is not the time for us to normalize, right, this rhetoric and these policies, and this is the time for us to organize and fight. So isn't that a good quote, right? So don't stop, folks, right? You're here, you're giving of your entire day on a Saturday. This is just part of the process, right? Joseph said he just got politicized, or became an activist 3 months ago. We need way more, right? So that's one. The other one is by another colleague that I think is really cool, Sandra. She runs like our advocacy project also. And Twitter's cool because you have to do it all in 140 characters, right? So Sandra said, because lawyers plus mobilization plus political accountability equals social change, right? Isn't that awesome? So lawyers plus mobilization plus political accountability equals social change. That means all of us have a role to play. And although everybody, as soon as they think of ACLU, and we do have awesome litigators, you'll hear from them. Yeah, and you think of ACLU and you just think of lawyers, which again, they're awesome, right? But it's beyond the lawyers. The lawyers are going to use all the legal tools to challenge these unconstitutional policies and actions, but it's going to be up to us, the people, to march in the streets, to go into the mayor's office, to hold the sheriff accountable and the county board of supervisors, and figure out what power and what change we can move in our local communities. And like Hector said earlier on before he introduced me, this is not just about it's not just about the president. The president alone does not define our democracy. And it's going to be up to us to hold him, Congress, and every other elected official accountable. And the ACLU cannot do it alone. We need every single one of you and your friends and neighbors to fight back together. So thank you all for being here, and then I'm going to pass it back to Miguel.
Thanks, Norma. Thanks so much for everything. So Norma has over 20 years of experience doing organizing, and it shows. It really, really shows. So yeah, give it up one more time for Norma.